I walked off the pitch in Doha that evening and I felt a stillness I had rarely known. The roar of the crowd faded. The images of soaring into the box, of celebrations past, they flickered at the edge of vision. But what stayed with me was the quiet of a chapter, maybe ending, but more deeply the quiet of change. Everyone saw the goals, the records, the trophies. What they didn't always see was the moment when everything asked, what comes next? In Qatar, I became the first man in World Cup history to score in 5 separate tournaments. That is a fact I hold as proud. But I also know that records are made in eras, in context, in occasions, and they are not always the measure of purpose. I came home after that quarterfinal exit and I knew something inside had shifted, because this is not about defeat, it's about identity. It's about when you are no longer defined by the spectacle, but by what continues beyond it. The path from Madeira to Manchester, from Madrid to Turin to Saudi Arabia, it's been built on ambition, discipline, obsession. Every morning at 5, every diet refusal, every extra sprint when the others stopped. But ambition is a servant, not a master. And when the big stage shifts, when the goal stands still and the crowd fades at full time, you must ask, who am I when the spotlight looks elsewhere? I didn't say much publicly in those hours after our exits to Morocco national football team. I retreated into my room, the captain's armband by my side, trophy dreams swirling in the air. The coach, Fernando Santos, told me after the Switzerland game, Cristiano will talk. He had made the decision to start another young forward. I came off the bench and our team powered a 6-1 win. He told me plainly it was a strategic choice. I nodded. But inside I knew I was having a conversation, not just about minutes on the field, but about purpose, legacy, control. In that locker room, the silence felt heavy, not because the crowds weren't there, they were. Not because the records weren't there, they were. But because I sensed that I was being asked, when you have done almost everything, when the world knows your name, what drives you? When the noise quiets, I remember thinking, if not for the trophy, what then? Weeks later, I sat in an interview and was asked, is winning the World Cup still your dream? I looked into the lens and answered, honestly, no, it's not a dream. I explained that to define who I am by one tournament, 6 or 7 games. You think it's fair? I asked. It was a moment of truth, not for the public, but for myself. Because I knew the stage would change, and if I did not change with it, I would become a prisoner of the past. The world saw a smiling young boy from the Portuguese islands. They saw the Real Madrid goals, the Manchester United comebacks, the Juventus battles. But fewer saw the nights when I lay awake imagining what I would feel when the cheering ceased. Now in my late 30 seconds, wearing the armband for club and country, my body still responds, but my mind asks bigger questions. What is success when you have already broken the barriers? What is significance when the next generation is ready? When I signed for Al Nassr in 2022, it wasn't simply a move to a new league. It represented turning of the page. A fresh field where I could still score, still win, but also where I could redefine the metrics. I could look at it and say, here is where the game becomes less about being seen and more about being meaningful. And in that quiet moment after Doha, I knew urgency was replaced by reflection. There were moments of disappointment, yes. In the game against Switzerland, I watched from the bench. My replacement scored a hat-trick. The headline read, Portugal dominate. I walk off the field alone when others stayed to applaud. The image stayed with me. But from that moment, I realized being the starter isn't everything. Being the leader is everything. Perhaps the leadership that matters now is inside out. I remember one evening with my son in a hotel room. I asked him, do you know why daddy still trains at this hour? He looked up at me and said, because you're the best? He smiled And I realized that is the trap, because best is external. What matters is why you train when no one watch. That plate crunching sprint after the game when you are meant to rest, that silence, that is the message. It's not just look what I did, it's look what I became. Legacy was always the language I used. From childhood, I said I would leave Madeira and prove them wrong. I worked so my children would have a different story. I worked so the records would stand. But after the World Cup, I asked, do the records matter or do the people they touch matter? A boy in Addis Ababa watching a highlight, an amateur in a dusty field in Morocco dreaming of his hat-trick. These are the stakes now. And so I turned inwards. Training change, not less intensity, but different intensity. Recovery became as sacred as the sprint. Family time became not a reward, but a foundation. I start to see that the defining moment might not be scoring, but what happens after you score. Because when you stop, you still are, or you should be. I look ahead, I turn pages, I stop measuring days by titles and start measuring them by presence. I walked through locker rooms and felt the familiar scent of jerseys, the heat of the turf, but I wasn't only thinking of the next goal. I was thinking of the next conversation with my daughter, of laughter in the backyard, of business meetings at dawn where I would mentor rather than score, because the needle of my life had shifted. And in all these, the World Cup exit became less of an end and more of a signal that the field was wider than the tournament. I remembered back to Doha, the tunnel, the spotlight off, the cameras gone. I remember the bus ride. It wasn't the medals I carried, it was the echo of what could have been. I realized then sometimes the biggest wins happen when you think you have already won. I speak now of preparation for when the final whistle doesn't blow for me anymore, not because I fear it, but because I respect the moment. I have said publicly, soon I'll cry. Yes, the tears will come, but not out of defeat, out of gratitude. Because if you have given your life, your body, your mind to something, the closing of that chapter isn't the end, it's the arrival. I still want to compete, I still want to win, I still believe in new goals, but the game I play now is different. It is less about them and more about us. It is less about me and more about the legacy I carry when I walk off the stadium and into the home. I will work so that when I leave, I'm not only remembered for the goals, the speed, the
trophies, but for the inspiration, the passage of flame, the hand lifted in the crowd of a boy who dared to dream because he saw someone else do it. The quiet that followed Doha was not emptiness, but clarity.
I knew the game will always find me, but I also understood now that I had to find the game. It's one thing to chase records. In fact, I became the first player to score in 5 World Cups, but it's another thing to chase meaning. At 37, 38, 39, you realize the legs still answer, but the questions change. In an interview, I said plainly, if you ask me, Cristiano, is it a dream to win the World Cup? No, it's not a dream. I asked the lens to define what? To define if I'm one of the best in history, to win one competition of 6 games, 7 games. You think it's fair? That moment, that confession was the real turning point. I wasn't done, far from it. But I was done letting one moment define the rest. On paper, it looked like a winding path, a 5-time Ballon d'Or winner champion in England, Spain and Italy, turning to the Saudi Pro League at age 37. Some saw it as the sunset, because what mattered now wasn't just the destination, it was the legacy of every day. When I signed for Al Nassr in December 2022, I wasn't just signing a new contract. I was signing a new identity, a place where the scrutiny was different, the goals were different, and the platform could be used differently. No longer just trophies and headlines, but influence, purpose, impact. I started waking up the same at 5. But the why had changed. It wasn't to prove them wrong. It was to be hard to forget. That's why I never stopped training at dawn. That's why I kept improving. Because I still believe in the craft. I told myself, As long as my head and body are fine and I enjoy football, I will keep playing. When I feel like I'm no longer useful, I'll be the first to make the move. In that move, I began to think beyond the pitch. My family, my children, the future, they weren't trophies, they were stakes. One afternoon, I sat with my youngest son. He asked, "Dad, why do you still train so early if you've already done everything?" I paused, because there is no perfect answer. You could say, because I want to keep being the best, but the truth is simpler and harder, because I don't want to be the same person when no one's watching. The game changed, the audience changed, but the standard remained. And now the measure of the standard was different. I look now at the records. 900 plus goals, 5 Ballon d'Ors, Champions League. I scored in 5 World Cups. But I also look at the business I build, the brand I create, CR7. Because I have said openly, I have other passions, I'm going to have more time for me. I'm going to have more time for my family, to raise my kids. That acknowledgement was not weakness, it was strength. Accepting change is not stepping down, it's stepping forward. The next season in Saudi, my goals kept coming, but something else changed, the way I walk off the field. After a goal, I no longer raise the arms high the same way. I looked at the bench, at the coaches, at the young players, at my children in the stands. I thought of the next era. I thought of the ones watching them, not just me. Because I realized the greatest goals may not be the ones I scored. They might be the ones I inspired. People ask, will you stop playing soon? In interviews, I answer soon, but I think I will be prepared. It will be very, very difficult. Probably will cry, yes. It wasn't the prediction of an end, it was a promise of readiness. I knew the adrenaline of football would stay lodged in my veins, and the truth, nothing will be able to compare to the adrenaline that we have for football when we score a goal. But I was okay with that, because I also realized everything has a beginning and everything has an end. And when the end comes, the next beginning becomes your new purpose. And that's back in Portugal, the critics still said I was too old. The headlines asked if my cycle was over. I responded in a press conference, quitting Portugal never crossed my mind. I continue to be an asset. When I'm no longer an asset, I will be the first to leave. That was not arrogance, it was clarity. I knew the value I still brought, but I also recognized that value went beyond the boots. It was in the voice, in the example, in the legacy of the badge on my chest. And so the question changed from, can I win more, to what will I win next, where I play next, who I influence next. I look at young players in the Saudi League, hungry, raw, unbroken. I thought I've been that boy. I've seen the scorned and doubt. Now I will be that mirror and maybe the hero. Because being the hero isn't about scoring the winning goal, it's about turning the underdog into the winner. My story gave them permission. There were nights when I felt the weight of what I had done, trophies perched at home, media accolades. But in the locker room after a big win, I found myself thinking of things I had neglected. The missed birthdays, the flights home, the training over family dinners. I remember saying I want to do more fun things. I love playing padel with my closest friends. That longing was not regret, it was recognition. A recognition that as the noise fades, what you have left is what you lived for. And now I live for more than one highlight. I live for a laugh with my kids at dawn, for the look on my daughter's face when I run into the house after training, for the handshake with the young player I once was, for the contract I signed that doesn't just say CR7 goal machine, but CR7 mentor, entrepreneur, father. I'm not done because I'm old. I'm done because I've changed. I changed purpose and I changed the game. Because when you win, everything is easy to keep winning. When you change everything, it's harder to stay true. I changed my definition of winning. It's no longer just lifting the trophy. It's not just a number on the board. Is the moment after you lift it? Is the person next to you when you lift it? Is the story you leave behind when the cheering stops? So when you ask what really happened after the 2022 World Cup, I'll tell you this: I didn't step out of the game. I stepped into the next act. I didn't stop scoring. I started building. I didn't seek applause. I sought impact. I didn't chase headlines. I chased meaning. And I didn't end the story. I rewrote it. Because the game didn't retire me. I decided how I would retire it. And the age of 37 inches Doha, that was not the end. It was the signal that the next era had begun. And if you're here listening, if you're chasing your dream, remember this: when you've climbed one mountain, look ahead, because a new summit will appear. And climbing it might just become your new greatest goal.